Welcome to FitBody Lifestyle, the show where we dive deep into the world of fitness, health, business, relationships, and the art of living a balanced life. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Greg, and we're here to give you the benefit of our experiences in the fitness and bodybuilding industry, the corporate world, running a business, personal development, and building healthy relationships.
Whether you're sweating it out in the gym, hustling in your business, or seeking balance in your everyday life, you're in the right place.
So lace up those sneakers and grab that water bottle, and let's get ready to transform our minds, our bodies, and our lives. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of FitBody Lifestyle, and it is going to be a fantastic day. I'm just going to say that out the gate. One, because I'm here with the love of my life, Jamie, Mama Bear, and then we also have our very special friend, guest, family member, Mr. Drew Brannon. Drew, hi.
Hi, Papa Bear.
Welcome.
Yeah, it's good to be back. It's done with our show season, right? So get to spend some time together here, the holidays, and unplug a little bit for 10 weeks, and then we'll be right there at the Arnold.
Ready to go.
Yes.
I think everybody knows you, but since you're not on the show every week, let's do your check-in word for this particular. As Jamie's whispering to me, check-in word. So we'll be completely transparent. She had to remind me. It feels so normal for you to be here, so that's why I think I forget about the check-in word. But I would like to have a check-in word for today for this conversation.
Excited.
Awesome.
I'm excited. I think the first time I was on here, I didn't really know what to expect. And then just the overwhelming love and support from the viewers and the messages. It was overwhelming, definitely overwhelming. I'm not going to lie. When that Monday it dropped, had lots of questions kind of come up, which is great. That's why we're here doing another one. So yeah.
We realized how much people want to know more about the training aspects and the things that we're going to be talking about.
And that is one of our objectives for 2025 is to get Drew in here more frequently and focus on some of the topics that are near and dear. So those feedback items that you give to Drew, please give them to us as well, because when you tell us, then that helps us shape. And we have not forgotten about one request that we'll do in 2025, which is to have a member of the armed forces come in and talk about training while they're in service. We have some other things planned. I think that's the one that just comes to mind. I know that we have that on our sheet, but is there something else we're doing?
No, I think we have a lot. Well, we have a lot of things coming.
We'll
tease those, but I want to hear the introduction. Who are you? Tell us more.
Drew Brannon, coach for FitBody Fusion, proud husband of Jordan Brannon. I don't know. You guys ask me this all the time.
I think we could call you the trainer for FitBody Fusion too. I mean, Drew is really
you're a coach. You educate our coaches.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I do have. Yeah. So
trainer, educator, all around good guy.
Perfect. Let's put that as my job title.
So our topic for today is we are going to talk about day one mindset and day one training. And day one mindset is something that I acquired actually in the corporate world, but I then applied that to fitness. And when you think about day one is the day that you go in. It's the first day of your program. Maybe you've got a new program. Maybe it's your first day in the gym ever. Maybe it's that kind of excitement. And on that day, you're really focused on getting things right. But you're also open to feedback and open to the other information that you may get during that day. You're enthusiastic, you're passionate, but you're focused on making that day the most effective and most important day for you. When you can carry that day one mindset into day two, and I know it's day two, but then day one becomes day one, you just rinse and repeat that mindset. That applies to training in a big way, and there are always going to be ups and downs in training. So what we want to kind of talk about today is how to set yourself up for success in embracing that day one mindset and allowing yourself to receive whatever it is that your body is going to give you that day, and then maximizing that so that you are focused on just that day. You're not focused on what happened the day before. You may have had the best workout of your life. You may have had the worst workout of your life. It doesn't matter, because today is day one. It doesn't matter what you have programmed for tomorrow. You're doing lower body today and you love doing lower body. Tomorrow is upper body and you hate doing upper body. If you're thinking about how much you hate doing upper body the next day, then you're not putting all of your energy into day one, which is today. So Drew, maybe with that lead in.
No, absolutely. And I think a big part of, one of the other episodes that I was on the podcast was training's not fun all the time. And I know it got a lot of people's attention, but if we can have that day one, enthusiasm, excitement, attention to detail, day in and day out, like that's where we really see the progress within an athlete, because they go in there, they set their expectations for the session, they smash the session. They're not worried about tomorrow's sessions, like you said, or scrolling through Instagram and getting lost in the session, and they're just super focused. I remember when I got my first program and I was so excited. I wanted to just completely rewire my brain and how I thought as an athlete, because the coach I was working with at the time had some different views. And I think that that's super important to just obviously remember everything you've learned from prior coaching experiences or prior time in the gym, but be moldable and coachable with this new system that is going to be put in place, and take that day one, ask the questions, and then progress from there.
I want to add one of the things that I think about when I think about a day one mindset too is, coming in with that sense of curiosity. And you had mentioned something when you were talking initially about it is, what is my body capable of today? And that being present, being in tune, what am I feeling? Do I have more gas in the tank than I thought I did? Maybe I haven't been well. And so, I need to pay more attention, but that sense of curiosity, I think, can help us be more present in our mindset when we're there as well. So I'm excited to talk about some other tips.
Yeah.
So what's first on your agenda for us today, Drew?
I think I'd like to really start with, I use the term the onboard phase with athletes, but like my first 4 weeks within a training block or an onboard with a new athlete. And it's our time to really get to know each other. And that's know each other from diet adherence to cardio adherence to communication styles back and forth. But specifically, the training part is where I assess training footage review. Because we really don't know where everybody's at until we see some of that footage. And we do consultation calls, and everybody likes to tell us that they're really efficient and great at training until we realize that may or may not be the case. And then during that onboard phase, I lock in their movement patterns and kind of work with them back and forth collaboratively on what works for them, what has worked well for them in the past, and then getting through that, what I call the neuromuscular adaptation phase, which is that kind of got some heads turning on the previous podcast. And the way I like to really explain that on a deeper level is our body. I don't consider that progressive overload. We get stronger, in quotes, within the first 4 weeks of a training block within those movements, and it's more of a neural thing. So we're just becoming more efficient and moving within that movement pattern, not truly getting into that progressive overload. We've talked about this, and something that gets brought up pretty frequently is like, oh, they're at the 6-week mark and athlete wants a new training block. And it's like, well, you've really only had 2 weeks in this. And I explain this to all my athletes on the onboard phase. Like, look, this is our time to get this out of the way. Once we've solidified the training block, I know your technique is good, recovery is good. Now we can get into either a cut phase, cleanup phase, or a growth phase if we need to grow, for example. So I think a lot of athletes, it's easy to have the day one mindset, 1 week, 2 week, and then that shiny object becomes a little bit more dull. But the athletes that can have the day one mindset for a 16-week training block, those athletes are going to really progress, and the physique is going to show it.
Well, something you said in the beginning of kind of delving into this, where people think they already know and they're already really good at training. And I think that day one mindset in what we're talking about, and that kind of also back to that sense of curiosity is, am I doing this in the best way possible? I had somebody send me footage today, and this is some pro athlete. I know how to do a hip thrust, but I'm always feeling my quads. So I said, well, send me some training footage. And she had way too much weight on, and she was going really, really fast with the movement. And I mean, again, like, this is someone who's been very successful. So gotten to the pro level. So, I think, that day one mindset, part of that is being open to critiques and being open to maybe doing things differently. And certainly, like, if I'm going in and I'm doing an exercise that I'm meaning to hit one body part and I'm feeling it more somewhere else, like that sense of curiosity, okay, what am I doing? Oh, the one other thing is she was doing it on a hip thrust machine that is, in my opinion, maybe not the best,
Right.
The angle that they're put at and things like that. So again, like, that's that day one mindset. You have to be open.
Yeah. And I think it's gut checking at times to athletes. They might have had 4 plates on that. I'll use the one piece I don't really love is the Nautilus glute drive. I do like how there's a long back pad, so like the athletes can abdominally brace, push their low back into the pad, get that biofeedback. So from like a core alignment standpoint, I like it. But I don't love the way it comes down and then the angle of the foot plate, because it really does get a lot of
Which
quad.
is the one that we were talking about today. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Well,
Nailed it.
and it comes down to just like forces and angles and things like that. And I see 4 or 5, 6 plates on each side, and I'm like, that's
Exactly.
if like we truly can't just get into hip extension, just true hip extension with that much weight. Something else is going to be coming in to help us lift that weight. We're not powerlifters. Okay. So, and I think that day one mindset goes into like strip it down to 2 plates. And that can be tough for an athlete, you know, especially there's those athletes that they're motivated by being in a big box gym, being seen by other like other people in the gym. And it's great for them mentally. And then when all of a sudden they go from like 4 or 5 plates down to 2 plates, and they care about what people are perceiving. And well, we got to check that. We've talked about this, checking the ego out the door. It's the same thing with the day one mindset, just like clean logbook, start from scratch. And let's just pretend you're a true novice. You could be an Olympian. Doesn't matter. There's times we've had Olympians that we've kind
Absolutely.
of gotten on, and we're like, look, I'm going to take you back to square one and just rebuild from there. So much of building for bikini is with a scalpel and not a sledgehammer. And something I think we do a really good job paying attention to our movement selections and things like that with athletes. But they have to surrender, you know, in the day one mindset.
It is tough. And, you know, but you think about training for purpose, which is kind of the day one mindset, is why am I here today? And do you want to be admired because you're pushing 4 plates on a hip thrust? Or do you want to be admired because you get off the hip thrust after there's 2 plates and people are looking at your glutes and going, holy moly, they'll look at those glutes. And I mean, I remember going into the gym and yeah, it's impressive to see the guys pushing or girls pushing huge weight. And yeah, that's impressive. But what always impressed me more were the people who were using lighter weights, but I was watching the level of intensity and focus and exertion on there. And then they would get off, and I was always impressed by how good they looked. And at the end of the day, man, no division in all of bodybuilding ever asks you what your PR is for any particular lift. Nobody's going to ever ask you how many reps you get on this, how much weight do you push on that. Those are irrelevant in our sport. If you're training for CrossFit or you're training for powerlifting, yeah, those are relevant data points. But for you to compete in an aesthetic sport, why am I here?
Right.
What am I doing?
Well,
Day
even,
one.
even for a lifestyle person
You're right.
who's training for lifestyle, if you think about doing things
Longevity.
right, if I'm just throwing weight around, I'm going to more wear and tear on my joints and things like that. So like from my perspective as a retired athlete,
Quasi.
What'd you say?
Quasi retired.
until Drew talks me
I would
into-
love, please, viewers.
Oh no,
please
do not. You're gonna
spam
open
every
this.
FitBody Fusion page possible. I'm going to get in
No.
trouble for this. I want Jamie to do the Masters Olympia
Nope.
before she's done.
no.
Thank you.
Anyway,
For help.
so back to the topic at hand.
Okay, so I think this is a good segue into progressive overload, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
that's something somebody asked. Was different types of progressive overload if it's not just weight, you know. And
Well, hey, let's talk about what is progressive overload. Again,
Yes,
let's
define.
embrace that
Yeah.
day one mindset ourselves and say, let's not assume that everybody knows. I think progressive overload gets thrown out there a lot.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why people think that it's just increasing the weights is because they don't necessarily understand what is it and what's its purpose.
Yeah, so the way I view it, progressive overload is over an acute period of time, we are looking to increase either sets, reps, intensity. And the big one here that I want to kind of talk about is intensity, because it's not just objective with set number, rep number, but intensity is weight lifted. Intensity is internal work. Intensity is the ability to recover. So those are all things that kind of lead into a progressive overload. Tempo is a huge thing when we look at an intensity metric within a set, but it's not just pick it up, put it down. Okay, I can pick up 50 pounds. I put down 50 pounds. Can I pick up 55? And I think that's the disconnect is we lead right to like weight lifted as progressive overload. I personally like to use weight lifted with internal work. I guess we're all weird because we love how subjective the sport is, but the issue with internal work is it's subjective, right? Because the athlete has to be in tune with themselves and how that set felt to then give a measure of internal work. We could use RPE, right? So rate of perceived exertion. I like to use that in how many reps were left in the tank for a set um, until the athlete thinks they would hit failure. It's obviously a little different when they're by themselves, don't have a spotter because they don't really know how far they could go. But
Depending on the movement.
right, yeah,
Right, yeah,
exactly. Like we get a just like a plate loaded shoulder press. I was just talking to Rihanna Harley the other day about some training updates, and she's got a good gym that she's at now in Florida, and there's some pieces now that we can really take advantage that she moves well with that she doesn't need a spotter on. So and I think that's something with meeting an athlete where they're at when we're building these programs and looking at what they have access to in the gym to make sure they can progressively overload and not have to have somebody there all the time for them for a spot. But those are all things in my mind when it comes to progressive overload that we can modulate to make sure we're increasing something over a short period of time. We don't have to get into like the nuts and bolts and percentages that we're looking to get into. I think athletes then try to make it really complicated. You just stick to the reps and set scheme, you're increasing something, training hard, recovering well, we're going to grow.
So with that, then let's talk about the different ways of progressively overloading. I think, obviously increasing the weight is the one that we're
It's the one
talking
that's
about.
most common and
And
people think of.
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. And I want to come back to something where you said meet the athlete where they are. That really ties in with day one mindset of meeting yourself where you are. So it's not just us as coaches meeting you where you are. It's you meeting yourself where you are. How am I feeling today? What's my energy level? Am I dealing with delayed muscle soreness? Where am I at today in order to get the most out of my training today? That goes back to that day one. And I just wanted to mention that because you've got to meet yourself where you are. And you and I have shared this a lot of times, and I'm sure you've had this experience. Is some of the days where I did not want to go to the gym the most, was feeling the worst, was listening to my body and just went in and just started moving and just went through my routine and my normal progression. But it's amazing how you can get some of those workouts were my best workouts when I didn't feel it going into the gym. But I really think that in those moments, I was the most open to what my body was going to give me those days. And so I was pushing it to that level, not to some thought of what I thought I should be pushing to.
Preconceived notion
Yeah.
of what.
Not an expectation.
Yeah, and I have an athlete that comes to mind, newer athlete to my roster, wellness pro, and she trains hard, like really hard. Natural athlete, zero excuses. And that was one thing when we talked. She's like, "Look, I've never had anybody like oversee my training," and she was really excited. And she's checking with me like every 3 days right now because she's through her onboard phase, but her recovery, she trains so hard that like she's having to take multiple rest days because she's like, man, my quads are so sore from my quad and adductor day. It's affecting my ability to do my hamstring day.
Yeah.
She's like, I can't curl my heels to my butt because like my quads hurt so bad.
Tight, yeah.
So somebody like that, like I'm checking in with her a lot more frequently, and we're trying to come up with a consistent pattern. We haven't gotten there yet. And it's been about 3 weeks that I've been working with this athlete, but she has totally absorbed everything that I've kind of talked to her about and just checked her ego and started from ground one. And
I also love that she's giving you the feedback because I do also run into situations where, somebody might be feeling like that, but didn't tell me for like months. And then an injury or something happens and it's like, why didn't you speak up? Like, I love that
Because
she's
it said
communicating
so
that
in
to
my
you.
program that I do this on this day.
And that's tough. Like we say this, I said this last time. Our coaching styles are not dictatorships; they're collaborations. Our entire team is a collaboration, right? It's something that I think that is why we are as good as we are as a team. I'm very confident with saying that. And I think educating newer athletes. I had another athlete this week that was like, coach, like I just think this is too much for me. I said, well, let's talk this through. So what do you mean? I'm like, let's find some middle ground here. Holidays are coming through. He was feeling a little isolated, wasn't really recovering. I was like, if you don't communicate this to me, then I can't adjust the program. Well, my last coach would just tell me to suck it up and figure it out. That's not us. and that's not a single coach on our team. There's times we have to be firm with athletes,
Mhm.
don't get me wrong, but as a whole, that's not our mantra by any means. So, but the athlete has to continuously evolve from the day one mindset, learn, obtain, communicate for this to work, effectively.
And that's where your addition to this about being curious
Mhm.
is really applicable here in particular, is that be curious. And one of the ways to be curious is, hey coach, this is my feedback,
Mhm.
and what do you think? And it could be a, hey, thumbs up, all good, or it could be a, hey, let's adjust a few things because this isn't the outcome that we want. And I was thinking about a saying that we have always embraced, which is, and we'll get into progressive overload, by the way. I haven't forgotten that, so we'll go back to it. But there's a saying that I love, and it's kind of everybody's heard the, if repeating the same actions over and over is insanity. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is, if you if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And so that saying is something that I always think about, because so many of our athletes are unlearning
Right.
movement patterns, which they get in the movement assessment, but some of them are unlearning training philosophy and training approach, because, and I love the scalpel and sledgehammer, we use that a lot, training for purpose. But you've got to, if you've been successful up to this point, but yet you're not open to adjusting that, then your success may be limited to whatever you've accomplished at that point.
I think that's the same in anywhere of life, though,
I
Greg. Like
100%.
that's relationships.
Yep.
That's everything. Uh, Jay and I are big on 1% better every day. It
Yep.
doesn't matter what area in our life, when we wake up and our feet hit the floor, we decide on that day, where do we want to be better human beings? And whether that's athlete, coach, husband, wife, friend, it doesn't matter. And if not, you stunt your own growth. There's so many people that I've just watched over the years as either coach or athlete. I'm like, gotta take a step back and really look at what you're doing. And if you really want to progress in whatever area you would like to be better at.
Expectations are a funny thing,
Mhm.
and while I'm a believer in holding yourself to a high standard, there's a difference about expecting certain things.
Yeah.
And I think I've shared this before, the Buddhist statement that the stress occurs in the gap between your expectations and your reality. The greater the gap, the greater the stress. And we talk about this with prep, and athletes saying, well, in my last prep and this prep and that, and it's like, look, the last prep was good data.
Right.
But this prep is this prep. Let's deal with this prep and how your body is responding this time. Same thing in the gym, is that I know you may have been used to doing it this way, but if this way was working, then why have we not reached that next level? And asking that question of, you came to us for a reason. So part of that and it's not that you have not achieved great things up to this point, but we need you to clear the slate, clear the logbook. Let's start at day one.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, the other thing we've been talking about a lot lately, and what I like that you've said is, like, I really want our athletes to be becoming more self-sufficient, and that
Mhm.
critical thinking. And I do think that goes that hand in hand with this day one mindset, is like, and that's why I like that curiosity, is like going in, okay, am I paying attention to what I'm feeling, how I'm feeling it? How many reps did I have left in my tank? Like, asking themselves these questions. Cause a lot of times I have people say, I just want a trainer to just do it for me and tell me how much to do, which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with
Right.
in-person training. We love that. That's
Correct.
great. That's awesome. But then if you're not also tuning in and bringing your
Senses to it, you're not getting the most out of it.
exactly.
And it does. And I do think that's the gap, right, with online coaching, is we do need the athletes to, we're not there to physically put them in every perfect, plane of motion through an exercise. Having some, in-person training can be beneficial. It can also be a headache, which we've dealt
And it
with
can
that.
be a complicating factor that
Yes.
can
Yeah.
limit your progress.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Um,
progress.
Well, and what's and talking a little bit about the reasons why might it or might it not be helpful?
Okay, but
Are we
we're getting.
Yep.
Well, I think we should cover that topic, but I also think
We're gonna do that in a hack.
we can do that in a hack.
Okay.
And we've just gotten a little bit far from the different ways to progressively overload. So I want to make sure we cover that before we go further.
We are so excited to announce the 2025 FitBody Fusion Athlete Summit happening in Phoenix, Arizona on Saturday, February the 8th.
This is your chance to learn from the best in the industry, get hands-on posing critiques, and network with fellow athletes.
You'll hear from top pro athletes and get expert advice on everything to get you competition ready and recovered post-show.
Don't miss this opportunity to work one-on-one with FitBody Fusion coaches and even take home some awesome goodies and giveaways while you're at it.
Everyone is welcome, so register now at fitbodyfusion.com and join us on February 8th in Phoenix, Arizona.
Can't wait to see you.
Yeah, so I think the next one is going to really be tempo and how we can set a tempo scheme of just like an eccentric or lengthening phase of a muscle, and then either a pause or some sort of metric there, and then a concentric or a shortening phase, because we could take the same weight at the same reps and sets, and this kind of goes in that internal work aspect. But if I just slow the movement down, get a nice pause, control the movement back up, nice squeeze, that is an overload in work, right? It is still more work, more time under tension, if you will, from the previous week. So I love writing in tempos. Another thing
and I would just want to give a quick example of that. So if traditionally I was always taught the four count in the negative and the 2 count in the positive. So what we're talking about here is, okay, you can still do the 4 count in the negative, but instead of doing a 2 count in the positive or the concentric, we're going to do a 4 count in the concentric, or we're going to slow down the negative to a 6 count. But it's just, and 6 count, part of this is you train more, you can get more. Yeah, you don't have to sit there and go 1, 2, 3, 4, but you'll get used to what we see a lot of, and I think we've talked about this a lot with the training footage, is most people are just blasting through
way
their
too fast.
way too
They're
fast.
not feeling anything.
Yeah.
Well, and at that point, you're using momentum
Correct.
rather than muscle, and that's the difference in how you're
Well,
overloading.
and that's how other things get overdeveloped, right? So
Yes.
if we're using momentum, then it's truly not an isolated movement, and now we've got multiple joints involved, or multiple muscle groups involved that are then, we're not necessarily trying to directly target. Maybe a true novice bikini competitor that just needs muscle everywhere, we might not. We still want them to control the movement, don't get me wrong, but we're okay if some more accessory muscles get in there. But a higher level athlete, when we're using that scalpel, for sure, like they have to control. And I feel like when I look at training footage, I feel like I say, slow it down, number one. Or I say, what movement is this?
God, man, hallelujah! Because I know that's why I always tell them, please attach the name of the exercise you're performing, because sometimes you get stuff and you're like, wait, that's not that movement.
This isn't in your program.
And I'm like, sure, the videos could be better, maybe, but I'm like, okay, what? But anyways,
okay. So we talked about weight, we talked about tempo a little bit.
What's next?
I don't know. We talk about, sets and reps, I feel like, are pretty self-explanatory, but I think something that people are getting a little hung up on the lower volume side of the scale is they're just so focused on doing so many sets, right? And then the ability to recover is tough because intensity is so high. So finding a middle ground, I don't think we have application for anything over like 6, 7 sets of a single exercise. There's a couple of really small cases where we really get to 5 sets. But just controlling those, and then really, I'm more of a fan of controlling your sets and reps, and then from there modulating weight, tempo, or like an intensifier, which would be another way we're going to kind of talk about adding a little progressive overload. So a great example of how I'd like to see that done is, let's say we have 4 sets of 10 to 12 for a working set, and the athlete gets 12 in the first set, 12 on the second set, 10 on the third set, all with the same weight. And then on the 4th set, they're only able to get to like 6 before they fail. Well, then I just tell them, just get your 6, drop the weight a little bit, and then try to get me like 4, 5, 6 more. If you can't get 4, 5, 6 more, maybe only get 2 or 3, drop the weight again. Get somewhere then between like 12 and 15, right? So, and that would be like of a drop set scenario. But we don't have to just abandon that set right then and there. we can kind of pick up the volume on the back end and just drop the weight to make sure we're getting in the proper amount of work if you did overreach, if you will, on that kind of top set weight.
And I love that you went through this, and I feel like the opposite is also true. If you go in and you're aiming for that
Right.
10 to 12, let's say, and then you get to 12 and you're like, I really should have gone higher in the weight. What would you do at that point?
Yeah, I wouldn't even log that as a true set. I would, and I'm trying to get the girls to get better at, and guys, shouldn't just say girls, but I do like feeders for multi-joint movements, for like our true progressive overload, heavy.
So will you explain feeder?
Yeah. So yeah, good. So I program warm-ups, feeder, working, and back-offs for our most multi-joint movements. And typically 1 to 2 warm-up sets, just depends on the athlete and where they're getting to in working weight. So if the athlete's going to dumbbell already out, let's just use 100 pounds, for example, they might do 1 set of 20s with the warm-up, maybe another set of 45, 50. It should not be taxing by any means their warm-ups or the feeders. Well, now how am I going to get from 50 to 100 for the working set? Then I implement a feeder. So I typically recommend like a 3, 4, 6 rep tops feeder set. So maybe the athlete grabs 75s, 80s, and they just go for 2, 3, 4 reps, something like that. It's enough where like mentally they're connected with the movement. They're not going to hurt themselves jumping from 50 to 100. So it's a little bit like a primer set, some people call them. But I don't count that as working volume. It's just a way to get to our working volume. So now the athlete's at 100 pounds, ready to go, 4 sets, 10 reps. They do their sets. Let's just say they did set 1 at 10, set 2 at 10, set 3 at 8, and set 4 is it's a dumbbell RDL, got really sloppy, little back, and only ended up getting like 5 clean reps. Drop the weight, athlete has to take a break. That's okay. I'm a fan of that. Then let's take a back off set. So then I'd have the athlete, they'd be instructed to do 75% of whatever that working weight was and go for a clean 12 to 15 reps. Really focus on mind-muscle connection and just slow down and make up that internal work variable that we missed out of that second half of that last set that we should have gotten. But if all 4 were beautiful and they got to 9 reps on that 4th set and they're like rocking on, like I feel great, then we don't take a back off set most of the time. There's sometimes in prep if we do need just like overall caloric expenditure higher, maybe fatigue's higher. So they're not pushing, their intensity is already taking a hit in terms of, weights lifted. So I may instruct them to do a back off set just to make up for more, volume. But typically like in an off season, those back off sets are there to make up for that overreaching.
That as you were talking about that, it's so funny. You brought me back to high school and the strength coach that I had in high school, and we were training on the basic powerlifting moves. And one of the things that he would always encourage us to do would be whatever your max is, we're going to add 10% to that, and you're not going to actually do the repetition, but you're going to unrack the weight. And you're going to unrack the weight so you can get used to that feeling of the weight. Because if your goal is to progressively overload, which is what he was doing for us, and if my bench was 315, but my goal is to get 335. If the first time I'm feeling 335 is on the day that I'm testing for it, right, it ain't going to go very well. I mean, I could be I could be energetically high and stuff, but being able to get used to that weight really was the difference maker. And that applied to squats, deadlifts, everything is just, and that's why I love the feeder set so much, is just getting used to that, not just making that big jump into your higher weight sets and your working sets until you're used to that.
Yeah. And some athletes might not need a feeder.
That's
like
right.
If we're talking about it like a dumbbell shoulder press for a more newbie athlete, maybe they're only working at 15 pounds. So like maybe do a 5 and a 10 for a warm up. They're good to go.
Yeah.
Like some of the girls, Jay, sometimes she'll grab like 50s to dumbbell overhead press. Well, she's going to need a couple warm-ups or maybe one warm-up and one feeder. And that's the thing. And I think that's something I guess I could have been better at with some of the girls, and going back to like assuming in like day one mindset that just as much as, letting an athlete absorb the day one mindset, also the coach has to remember that if they're going to wipe themselves clean, maybe I could have been a little bit better explaining some of these things, because it's still kind of, I go back to Rihanna's call the other day. We had a great call, and she didn't realize that I really wanted how I wanted her setting these sets up and why. And, that's something to continue to get better at and continue to educate our athletes on. But, it's getting to embrace that. And when they do embrace it, the system works very, very well. So that's kind of.
Okay, so we talked about tempo. We talked about the different volume, sets and reps. You did talk a little bit about drop sets, but I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I mean that's more of like it's intensifiers. So
Yeah.
like most intensifiers that I'm using right now are I really like rest pause. A rest pause set is a great way to really kind of just push some intensity. Drop sets.
Let's explain.
I was going to say, yeah.
Thank you.
Explain rest pause. Just
yeah. So like a nutshell, I typically give a range of 30 to 45 reps, just kind of depends. The athlete will pick a weight. So let's just say we're going to do dumbbell lateral raises, something I really like to do, rest pause with that movement. The goal, and I'll set the goal, but most of the time, let's say like between 8 and 12 reps. So they're going to pick a weight that they're failing between 8 and 12 reps. They'll do the first set of 8 to 12, and then they should be reaching close to failure by the time they get to 12. Then they're going to keep them in their hand, and they're going to just take 10 seconds. Count to 10. Let's just say they got 12. Then they're going to do the next one, and they get to 8. When I were at a sum of 20, I would tell them either 30 or 45, and it's a bunch of little mini sets with the same weight to get to the desired number of reps. So weight does not change on a rest pause, whereas like a drop set, maybe it's a triple drop of 8. It's 8 reps with 10s, 8 reps with 7.5, 8 reps with 5s with minimal rest. Literally just put the dumbbells back, grab them, put in. It's less rest than a rest pause set. So those are the two major ones I use. Sometimes we'll do supersets, which would just be like 2 different movements stacked together with minimal rest. So that's just a little different because it's not the same movement, but 2 different movements. I really like doing some walking lunges, superset with like adductors for some of my wellness or figure girls, just to really like kind of finish that pump off and get as much blood as possible in an area.
Yeah. The one thing I always add with the rest pauses is that during that 10-second pause, not to just sit there with the weights in your hands or whatever, I really encourage the really deep breathing.
Yes.
To make sure that you're circulating, you're getting oxygen to the muscles, you're if you're just sitting there waiting for that 10 seconds and you're not doing, I really encourage that mental reset, but accompanied by the breathing.
Let's tie that into soreness, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's do that.
I don't like how a lot of athletes they try to make a direct correlation with soreness and work within a session. And I'm pretty strong with this opinion that I don't think soreness is a direct relationship to how intense a session was. It's more of like an energy system thing for me. And I mean, prime example, and this is what you think about it, is like if you just don't breathe, we're doing an extended set. Let's say we're doing a rest pause and you start holding your breath and you're heavy breathing, not allowing yourself to get that heart rate down and like really just move blood. You're going to be more sore, but it's the same amount of work that you ended up doing. So I really don't like when athletes are trying to say, well, I'm not getting sore. Good. That is a great thing. I'm so happy. What do you mean? Because that means you're recovering.
Yeah.
Now we can hit the gym 2 days later. Instead of you walking around like you and I did after we started training for a week.
Hey, throwing me under the bus.
us. And then you attacked me with a Theragun. Sorry. So
if you know, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, if you think about it, like, I don't understand why athletes are like, oh my gosh, it's not good. No, that is good. If you're progressively overloading week after week and not getting sore, now we're growing. So, there's a lot of things that lead into being sore, which maybe we can cover on a different day with, nutrient timing and resting and heart rate. Something I've been getting on with some of our Olympians right now is they're deep in, if they're in off-season improvement season, getting that heart rate back down before we're going again and getting into that next set. And we're having them do that so they can really put out as high, the highest amount of work possible in that next set. So, we could let that athlete not let their heart rate come down, and they're going to be sore the next day. But yeah, so I think that's another thing that's not a soreness is not a thing of volume directly, I should say. And if volume isn't high enough or low enough or whatever it might be. So
What about a pump?
what about a pump?
What about a pump?
Chasing the pump?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Well,
Greg?
I mean, I think that I get this feedback a lot of that I think we need to talk about mind muscle connection, but I think we should talk about that in a separate episode.
Yeah, I think
Um,
they're very a pump and my muscle connection are very they go
I think
hand in
that's a
hand.
good one for another episode.
Okay, then we won't
So we'll
talk
stay
about
on
that.
day
Yeah,
one.
so
Haha,
there
you're
you
gonna
go.
have to watch the next one.
Well, I mean, we've covered a lot, and we're running
We have.
short on
have.
time.
Yeah,
So.
and I do want everyone to tune in because I think as we talk about some of this stuff, I'm not going to call it myth busting. I'm just going to call it expectation busting. Maybe is that,
Yeah.
and it really aligns to the day one mindset that we're talking about. But is there anything else you want to cover? Was there anything else on intensifiers or progressive overload that we did not cover that you can think of? I think we covered it all, but I don't.
Yeah, the only thing I really want to say about volume right now is I feel like we're getting two ends of the spectrum. I feel like athletes are reporting they want really, really low volume or they want high volume, and I don't understand why. But I'm getting a lot of influx, and our coaches are getting a lot of influx of athletes that want like a 5x5 or a 5-3-1 approach. Great if we're powerlifting.
I was about to say, if you're a power lifter, that's awesome.
I don't get that for our bodybuilders. I really don't. And I don't know if it was something that I said on the last podcast, but it kind of seemed to come out after that episode was released about just going. I think I made a comment that we're transitioning to a more low volume approach, but by no means was I trying to say like we're going 5-3-1s or 5x5s. There's not application for us. There's not application for a 1 rep
When you
max.
say 5x5s, 5-3-1, so
Yeah,
explain
sorry,
that
5
just a-
sets of 5 reps, or 3 working sets. Where for the 5-3-1 would be a set of 5, a set of 3, a set of 1, which is more in line with like a powerlifting modality. There's not application for us to do 1 rep maxes to kind of sort through a logbook. We with coaching bodybuilders, there's too many ebbs and flows with food being higher, food being lower, cardio higher, cardio lower, that can really alter that logbook from a 1RM. So if we're using a 1RM and there's trying to spit out this beautiful
1 RM being 1 rep max, right? Okay,
I
sorry.
know
I
you're
call you
good.
on the
I know
acronyms.
I'm horrible at that. If we're going to work at 80% of our 1RM, but we're 3 weeks out from a show, that athlete can't do that. It's okay. That's why I used to love powerlifting. I could eat whatever I want. I didn't have to do cardio, and I could just lift things up and put them down. It was way easier than this stuff. So, getting into maybe doing some what I consider to be auto regulation with some of our higher level athletes, where I let them go and do an AMRAP, the hurdle with as
AMRAP
many reps as possible.
possible.
On a set, my issue there is going to be when we do whatever we can do to get the rep up, are we going to count that or not?
That's
right?
right.
So it's going to take someone that's really trained that knows like, hey, I got to this number of reps cleanly, and they know what a clean rep is for us.
That brings back, and I occasionally I'll relay some military experience, but when we were grading physical fitness tests, and the push-up is a specific movement that you have to do in a specific way. Your back has to break the plane of your elbows, and when you're counting those, and especially in the schoolhouse at Officer Canada School, if you really wanted to mess with somebody, because if they are not executing correctly, you will recount the repetition. So it could be a 1, 1, 1, go down further, 1, 1, 1, go down further, and that's usually what it was, or come up all the way and lock out. And if you really wanted to mess with somebody, you would wait till they got after, because if somebody just was clearly not executing the exercise correctly, you would stop them and say, go to the back of the line, read the manual, talk to your fellow soldier and get that straight. But if you really wanted to mess with somebody, you waited until they got to 10, because after 10, it counts as a scored event. So if you really wanted to mess with somebody, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. And there were times when literally I would count 11 repetitions. Like I would never want to get anybody past 10, but there were times when somebody did 25 repetitions, I counted 3 because only 3 of them were correct. And so as we talk about PO or progressive overload in particular, you got me doing it now with the acronyms. But I do think it's important when we're talking about reps, not every rep is created equally.
No.
So it's what you're talking about. And I think what we're talking about is quality
of
repetitions.
Mhm.
So if you get sloppy, that's what the back off set is. If you get sloppy in your form and you're using
Or the
some
drop
momentum,
set.
or in the drop set, you're getting sloppy in your form, or it's almost like that vision of somebody pushing a weight overhead and one side's going up and the
They
other side.
arch.
I mean, you can see
Yeah.
Olympic lifters doing that when they're doing their 1 rep max, right?
And there's application
Yeah,
for them
and
there.
there is
But for
application,
us,
not.
it's not. And it's, I think it's tough. That's where the ego day one mindset, just when you get that new training block from a coach, that the like little you see Men in Black?
Yep.
The little silver, I don't know what it's called.
Yeah.
But
they
like
erased
sometimes-
the brain.
It's called the neuralizer.
Is that what it's called?
The memory
I
escape.
can't believe you remember
I
that.
know.
He
I'm
would
a
know
movie
that.
guy, so
He likes that anime.
Yeah, he does.
oh my god,
It's
okay.
it's
Let's
anime.
get into a further debate.
Anyways, I kind of wish, and that's why I like working, like sometimes working with like a true novice athlete is more advantageous. So I just signed on a 17-year-old classic physique guy, and he's played football, and he's like, coach, I'm coachable. I just need a coach to tell me what to do and how to do it. I'm like, that's like some Play-Doh, right? Like I can just really take him and teach him properly. Get
You're not
somebody in there.
breaking old habits.
It's much harder to get somebody, unless you could just Men in Black. Just
And I the other part of that is that I do love it when people are coachable, but there's a point at which sometimes being coachable, you're just doing what you're told to do. And where we thrive the most, and you said this already, so I want to foot stomp this, is that where we thrive the most is where we get the input back.
Right.
Hey, I'm doing this, but here's what I'm feeling. Or I'm doing this, but I don't know if I'm doing it correctly. It's that interplay back and forth. I don't want I don't want a soldier.
Right.
I don't want somebody to just, hey, I'm going to point you at that hill. You're just going to go take that hill, right? I want somebody who's going to say, I'm going to point to that hill, and you say, okay, I'm going to go get the hill, but what should I do when I get there? And how do I get there? Anyway.
Or I got there and,
yeah.
and I didn't see what I was supposed to say or expect something. Yeah. So that way you can course correct.
and educate them, and then they're better athletes in return back because they understand the what and the why, the how, and then their feedback is better. So,
Good stuff. Good stuff.
yes.
All right. So what's the checkout word? I'm going to tell you what mine is after you tell me what yours is.
Can you go first?
No.
Checkout word. Checkout word. That's what I used last time. It's very similar. Blessed.
Okay. And you can use the same. There's no like a requirement to use different checkout
I'm
words.
trying
So
to
you
mix
can
it up.
and you don't need to, but I'm going to tell you what my checkout word is, which is informed.
Okay.
I feel like my world has expanded every time we get a chat like this stuff. So you want to do a checkout word too? No.
I'm good.
Good is your checkout word. All right. So everybody, hey, thanks for tuning in. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, leave your reviews. And I think we hit that at the outset, as we really value those reviews so we can get better at this and give you the content that you want, that informs you. And thank you, Drew. Thank you,
Yes.
Jamie. And remember the 3 B's, which is be good to yourself
Be good to each other.
and be safe.
Bring that day one mindset to the gym.
Day one mindset,
Let's go.
baby. That's it.
Thank you for tuning in to FitBody Lifestyle. We hope today's episode has left you feeling motivated and equipped to tackle your fitness goals, business challenges, and the daily dance of life. Remember to value progress over perfection. Life's tough enough alone. Find the chosen family around you to help you along the way.
If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite streaming platform. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at FitBodyFusion.